Welcome, everyone. We are going to give it a few more minutes before we get started, just to make sure that we have allowed everyone who is attempting to get in to this webinar, which is the second session from Dr. Diehl. If you're returning, we want to thank you for your presence, for having come back. If this is your first session, just know that we will be making session 1 available on an on-demand basis if you need to catch up. So it's still not too late to register for sessions 3 and 4. If you did not see session number 1, you'll want to go back and catch up with session number 1 once it's available, and you'll be all set to continue with the series. This is a 4-part series. And it's still very promptly after 6, so we'll hold off a little bit more. Okay. In the meantime, if you have any questions for Dr. Diehl before we get started, go ahead, especially if you were here last week and you have some leftover questions or something that popped into your mind, or perhaps during the week while you were teaching, something came to your mind and you would like to ask Dr. Diehl a question about it, go ahead. This is the time to do it. We could be answering those questions before we get started. Also, if you have any questions about PEPSA or CARD, we'll be happy to answer those too. All right, it's only 6:02, but hopefully we don't have too many trailers. So I think I am going to get started. Yes. And between the time I get started and the time people we get to the part where Dr. Diehl starts presenting, hopefully if we have late trailers, they would have come in. So first of all, thank you for being here. Again, welcome to this second session presentation from Dr. Diehl, her series on integrating the language and complexities of theory of mind, central coherence, and executive functioning, challenges to improve reading comprehension. My name is Lourdes Quiñones. I am a pediatric physical therapist with over 20 years of experience in the field, both in the clinic, classrooms, as well as in the home setting. I am also currently the program coordinator for PEPSA and a CARD consultant. The PEPSA stands for the Partnership for Effective Programs for Students with Autism, and CARD stands for the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities. We are a sister program to CARD. Again, PEPSA, to tell you a little bit about PEPSA, we are an initiative that supports Florida educators and schools' professional development effort for the purpose of enhancing the educational and academic experiences of our students with autism, and all the programs that serve them within the educational setting. PEPSA was funded in 1999 and founded and is funded by the Florida Department of Education K-12 schools, the Bureau of Exceptional Education and Student Services, also known as BEAS, and in partnership with the Center for Autism and Related Disabilities, CARD, we provide free professional development opportunities to Florida educators in the form of conferences, trainings, regional trainings, professional development trainings such as this one, as well as something we're very proud of, which is the PEPSA-Partnership program. Some of the conferences that we have we have a day known as the PEPSA Day at the CARD conference every January. It has been for the past few years in Orlando. So if you haven't been there, please make an appointment. Make sure that you set that in your calendar to be there. We also have the Summer Autism Summer Institute, and throughout the year, we provide plenty of training such as this one, for which you will want to click into our website to keep up with the trainings, which allow you to earn some hours of professional development that you can then turn into CEs at your own districts for each one of you. Again, before we get started, I would like to let everyone know that we are going to be using the Q&A chat. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you should see Q&A. Please put your questions to Dr. Diehl in the Q&A, and then use the regular chat just to comment on anything that you might want to comment, ask questions, and we'll be monitoring both of them. At this time, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Beatrice Buck, who will be telling you a little bit about herself and introducing Dr. Diehl.
Thank you, Lourdes. As Lourdes said, I'm Beatrice Buck. I'm the Program Planner Analyst here with PEPSA. So thank you all for joining us tonight. And thank you for those who have joined us for the first session and are back again. We're honored to welcome Dr. Sylvia Diehl back for session 2 of her series tonight. Dr. Diehl is retired from the University of South Florida Department of Communication Sciences in Tampa, Florida, where she taught augmentative and alternative communication, pediatric language, research, and autistic disorders, and was the Director of Language and Phonology Services. She now teaches Autism and Social Communication at the University of St. Augustine for Behavioral Sciences. She has a long history of clinical experience, including public school settings, university settings, and clinical settings. She consults for school systems and conducts workshops locally, nationally, and internationally. She has authored numerous journal articles and book chapters, along with numerous continuous education courses for the Medbridge Education and American Speech, Language, and Hearing Association. So thank you again for joining us, Dr. Diehl, and I will let you get started.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. Well, welcome back, and welcome to those of you that couldn't be here last time. I will try and make those connections as we go through. This is our first in the series of focuses on intervention. So we've got all of the framework under our belt, and we're going to move through to intervention. If I can get us to move here. Why am I not moving? Here we are. Okay, so first I just wanted to address how I chose what I'm giving to you. I really tried to choose those things that are both evidence-based, that we know work for children with disabilities and without disabilities. And then what we'll do tonight, so some of them, I hope most of them will be kind of familiar to you. But then tonight, what we'll do is we'll talk specifically how to tweak it or how to make those connections that we need to have for our students with autism. Remember, we're talking about functional connectivity. As much as we can, we need to connect their knowledge to their previous knowledge and to their world knowledge. And we're going to talk a lot about how to do that tonight. So today we're doing before. So we're going to talk a little about genre, priming, activating schema, graphic organizers, KWL, I think I use KWLH actually, writing questions, and anaphora. So I chose these strategies, one, to support the mental connections, the connections to the autism reading research, familiarity for the teacher rather than novelty, because then this transports from the special ed classroom and also into the inclusive classroom, which I think is vitally important. So for each strategy, we're going to talk about what the strategy is, what it supports, and how to make that process friendly to many autistic learners. We all know that nothing works for everyone. Okay, first I'd like to talk a little bit about just general teaching supports. In general, I can say that visual supports are so very important. So after talking with a couple of you this past week over email, I decided to include visual supports in our interventions, even though it's not specifically for reading comprehension. It certainly does help us in everything we do, in transitions, in all kinds of things. So let's first talk about what's the difference between presenting something orally and presenting something visually. One, orally is usually preferred by teachers because you can run what you brung, right? I don't have to think about doing anything ahead of time if I'm just saying it with my mouth. And that's a real advantage. However, for most autistic folk, they really are so well supported with visuals. So you want to think about everything you do, how can we make it visual? Why? Because it's permanent. So many of our children have trouble with listening comprehension, auditory processing, remembering what's happened. Remember that working memory we talked about? So when we have visual information, it gives them permanence. So if they lose track or they don't remember, they can look at something and go back and be able to create that semantic message that we want them to have. It allows for those longer processing needs because it's permanent, right? If I say something to you and you don't get it, too bad, so sad, it's gone, right? It's just poof. Same with sign language. If you don't get it, it's gone. It's transient. Visual supports are permanent in nature. So it also supplies some semantic hints if you use pictures, and you can use videos. I have a couple of autistic adults that got through both high school and college primarily through taking the information that was given to them in class and finding videos on YouTube or whatever that addressed what they want. So why visual supports? As we talked about, it supports comprehension and it allows for retention of information more readily. So it allows for that connection of information to be made more readily. So any lesson can be made more autism friendly, just writing words down as you discuss, or writing down complex directions, or as I'm going to share with you now, some schedules and checklists. So I'm just going to give you a couple of visual support examples. Visual supports are a whole nother lecture, but if you aren't familiar with them, they are such a wonderful gift to you in the classroom with your autistic students. So hang on just a minute, when we talk about visual supports, we have to think of what kind of symbols the children understand, right? So do they need a real object? So a cup is a cup, and you know if they give you a cup, they want something to drink, right? So then as we move up, we might have a picture, a real photograph of a cup, which a little more removed from the object. It's only 2D, right? And then we move up to line drawings, and line drawings themselves have symbolization that's quite intricate, where it almost looks like a photograph, all the way down to a chair that's drawn like a square H. So the symbolization that you use is important. Then the final and more complex symbolization would be the written word, which we're talking about today. So I'm going to give you some examples of these, even though they're not directly reading comprehension help, they will help you think about how to make things visual. So here we have a real object schedule. This is of course for a young child, and it came from Positive Beginnings with the thanks to Amy Weatherby. So you might take diapers, a diaper in one cubby, the Huggies in another, the cup in another, and the music instruments in another for maybe circle time. So the child would come up, get the change of diaper, handed it to you. You may need the diaper and the wash, but you would take those, do your thing with them, and then they would come back and put it in their cubby and then go to the next one, get their cup, match it to the picture of a cup next to their seat, and then they would come back, put it in the all done box, and go to the next one, which is the maracas for the music for circle time. So that would be an example of an object schedule. I usually use those those plastic shoe holders that you can buy pretty cheaply, and they hold objects for you for a real schedule. Here's a photo schedule where the teacher took actual photos to show each part of the schedule. And so maybe when you're done, you turn it over to say that's all done and this is next. I usually also put numbers on them because many of my children understand numbers pretty quickly. And then here's another one that's kind of mixed. For this child, circle time was difficult for them, so we used a real photo of our circle time, and the rest we used line drawings except for snack time, which was also a little difficult for them. And when we were done, I used a marker. He liked water-based markers, and he would mark through it, and you could see it's laminated. These were little pockets, and you could also pull them up and turn them over when you were finished, either way. So this allows children who don't really have the theory of mind to infer what's going to happen next, or the executive functioning to plan their day. This allows people to be less anxious. It allows them to move forward and know what's going to happen. It allows them to understand that there's an ending and a beginning. So I always introduce, now it's time for circle time, and I point to the picture and show them. And then when we're done, there is a very clear transition. Oh, we're all done with circle time. Let's turn this over, or let's cross this out. Now what's next? Oh, look, it's time for the good morning song. So I'm very clear in my transitions, and I know this is for very young children, but the same goes if it was a written word schedule, such as this is Jordan's schedule, and he was literate, so he would just cross out things and as we go. And it was simply a piece of paper that he could just use a water-based marker on a acetate sheet. So because certain periods change, and that's difficult for people with transitions, in the morning we would write down what special it was, whether it was music, whether it was art, whether it was PE, so he would know that in the morning and be able to get ready for it. I also taught him when there was a change in the schedule, which is usually very difficult for a child who has difficulty with transitions, that he could learn to cross that out and then write what was going to happen in there. So he still had the schedule and it still was accurate. And that helped them, was a visual way of showing transitions. So for those of you who have children who have difficulty with transitions, visual schedules are wonderful to do. Now, Jordan's loved presidents. He absolutely loved Abraham Lincoln. So I did, but I picked he tended to go off on Abraham Lincoln. So I picked Mount Rushmore because there was just a little bit of Abraham Lincoln and not a whole lot. But I usually use some kind of interesting pictures if it wasn't too distracting to the student. I really encourage from the very, very beginning, self-management of their schedule, whether it's a Velcro schedule or whether it's a written schedule. It's very, very important for them to have track of that and be able to keep track of what's happening during the day and what might change. It teaches them how to change, and it encourages flexibility. Oh, I see, we don't have social studies today, we have an assembly, and write it in. And after, I don't know, maybe a month, he would write it in itself just from the announcement. Okay, so that's a whole day's activity. Now let's talk about a within activity schedule, which means a schedule for one particular activity. So this is a real picture just for washing hands and what they get to do after they're done. Here's a within schedule with line drawings. There is a piece of paper under number 1, but it didn't come up very well. But you can see you get paper and then they get pencil. That helps them be independent with getting their materials together. Then they write their name on the paper, do their math, put their math away. And then we had a box for Sarah. I do this for many kids that have things that are teacher approved that they can play with or work with after their work is done, because left to their own devices, they don't always make great choices. So this was a nice way to give Sarah a way to get some sensory information or something to go for. Now, if you put something that's part of their particular interests, so for instance, I had a young man who loved maps. I always put little instructions on the map. You can look at the map for 5 minutes. So they understand, or you can look at the map until the teacher rings the bell, or whatever it is that changes destination. So you may even want to say you can look at the map until the teacher says it's time to put it away. But you need to make sure that you're setting that child up for success. Here's a within activity schedule. As I said, he liked Lincoln. For him, as he got a little older, turn in our homework, get our science book, get paper and pencil, listen to teacher for important information, read page, and I have him put it in, then work with friends in a group and write down homework. And that helped him become much more independent in school and need much less support and redirection from the teacher. Because as I said, he was very independent in how to do that. Now, one thing that really helps with that executive functioning, difficulty with organization, is to color code the activity schedules by subject. So everything science book was covered in yellow paper, the schedule was yellow, all of those kinds of things. So when they are going to get their homework and they know they need their science book, they know to look for yellow if it's science. And that seems to be very helpful in their organizational supports. You can include classroom rules if needed. Sometimes I put a little thought bubble up there that says, remember to raise your hand before you speak out loud. Those kinds of things that maybe are a little more difficult for them to remember, or they may be impulsively doing without thinking. And you can include specific instructions about what to do when work is done, as I said, which is also very helpful. So these things save you so much more talk and support. And if they, for instance, if they go off topic, you can come back and just point to where they are on their schedule so they understand they're supposed to be listening. So you point to number 4, and you don't have to say a lot. You can just walk by and point to number 4, and they're getting that kind of support they need to be doing what they're doing, what they're supposed to be doing. Okay, so that was our little trip down visual support lane. Do we have any questions about visual supports before we move on?
Not at this time, unless someone wants to jump in with a question now.
Yes, I was just thinking if they wanted to. If not, it's okay. I think most people know about visual supports, but not everyone, and not everyone really understands how much that supports autistic students. So now we're working on before reading, which is what we're going to work on for most of the night tonight. And the focus is to get that mind prepared for making connections in what they're going to read. Functional connectivity. I'm going to say that until you're like so tired of it. Okay, so genre. First, we're going to talk about what it is. We're going to talk about why we need to do that and a process that's autism friendly. So let's talk about genre versus text structure first. Text structure is a more overarching term. It's the way a text is organized. It's the way sentences are arranged and concepts are connected. So genre is a part of text structure. So text structure depends on why we're doing writing, who the audience is, what the subject of writing is, or the subject of reading is. Genre are the categories in which texts are based on. So it's the subject, the matter, the form, and the structure. So for the purposes of this series, I've selected school genre that provides a grouping that makes intervention strategies a little bit easier. Okay, so here are our overall categories of genre. So in narrative, we have fables, fairy tales, fantasy, folk tales, legends, mystery, mythology, and poetry. Then in persuasive arguments, we have advertisements, arguments, reviews. Nonfiction, we have biography and autobiography. Informational, expository, we have descriptive, sequence, compare and contrast, cause and effect, and problem solution. And then lastly, persuasive and nonfiction, we have arguments, discussions, debates, reviews, letters, and advertisements. Let me just tell you that autistic children don't always just glean what genre it is. Let me give you a for instance. My little Jordan, that the story was, I was there on Veterans Day, and the teacher had everyone sitting around with a little tiny book, which wasn't the best, but she was reading a story about a veteran and how he had sacrificed in his life for our freedom and all of the wonderful things that he had done. And then she gave everyone in the class a writing assignment to write a letter to this soldier, thanking him. And so my little Jordan wrote 2 pages, and writing was not his strength, and worked so hard on it. But what did he write? He wrote a narrative. He wrote about what he did, and kind of wrote a recall of the story that she read to begin with. And the teacher, I think, was under a great deal of strain. It was 3rd grade. And got furious with him because he didn't write the letter. He wrote a narrative. So she ripped it up. And I just wanted to come out of my seat because here was this child who rarely likes to handwrite, who had written a 2-page narrative. But we got past it. We really, really did. But this is why it's important to talk about genre, give them examples, and make those connections before you give assignments. So before they get a reading assignment, talk about what they're going to read, what kind of genre it is. Why do we teach genre? for comprehension. One, it builds confidence. Once they know a genre, once upon a time, they have this framework for being able to pull in the information, and it helps them. It provides a framework for their organization. It helps with logical thinking because you have that kind of consistency across. It identifies the main concepts and the purpose of the story. It allows for teaching familiar vocabulary. So a lot of times I teach vocabulary specific to genre. So if it's something that puts things in order, then I'm learning first, next, last, those kinds of things that they can use in their writing and understand in their reading. Allows for delineating fiction and nonfiction. And many times, autistic children have blurry lines between pretend and real. And so this is also very important. I think many times we assume that, of course, they know this was pretend because there are, unicorns in it, but they don't always get that distinction. So it's very important that you talk about whether it's fiction or whether it's nonfiction. It helps identify what's important and it visualizes the complex structure of the genre. So, ways to incorporate genre for autistic learners. I saw a lot of wonderful little posters all over this teacher's classroom. These were not it. These are not my favorite ones, but I could get permission to use these. And every time she introduced a reading, she'd go over and review what type of genre it was. And that helped so much, not just autistic readers, but other readers too. And it also helped in their writing because they became more and more familiar. And this isn't just for little kids. It's amazing to me. I work with middle school and high school quite often, and you'd be surprised how much of the basics they did not get early on because perhaps their learning comprehension, their listening comprehension wasn't very good. So they got some of the important things, but they were scrambling just to be able to survive in the classroom. And now they should be able to build on that frameworks, and they may not have been able to get them. So having visually clear posters of genre or anything that you're working on, that specific vocabulary, whatever, on the wall where you can point to them and show them that's your source and make sure that they're making those connections about what you're talking about makes so much difference. Writing keywords down as you give information. So what's wonderful about this is you don't have to plan ahead of time for this kind of visual information. You can just write as you go, writing keywords. So, we're talking about genre and you write genre down, and then you talk about, we're talking about narrative genre, and then you put plot and characters. And so you're putting the main things that you're talking about down as you go. And that helps them remember what the point was about what you're talking about and make connections to what they already know. Point out or have a student attribute genre before, after, and during readings, so connections are made in context. We talked about that already. And talk about the genre embedded in context of the assignment. So I want you guys all to write about this veteran a letter thanking them. What I read you was a story, was a narrative story, but this is a letter. Can anybody think about how we start a letter? Get them going, get them thinking about that. So here's just a little introduction that might help, that includes all the things we were just talking about. I love using fables because fables teach a moral lesson. which is nice in these days where we don't, sometimes we could use a good moral lesson about being kind or whatever. It also has a lot of figurative language and the kind of language that they need to learn to understand in a simpler manner. So today we're going to read a fable. So then I'm going to make a connection to a visual support. Maybe I have a little poster about fables or a poster with things about fables if they're up there. Fables are fiction, so I'm talking about a pretend story that teach a moral lesson. So we talk about what that means. It teaches us how to act or think, and you're writing keywords on the board: fable, fiction, moral. So now they're getting reinforced about this genre. It may be a good lesson, but the story that is teaching you about the moral lesson is fiction. So if I'm teaching them it's not good to lie, right? That's a good thing, but I'm telling them the difference between that and the story, which is the fable, which is fiction. So talk about anything that is confusing for people who may blur fiction and nonfiction or pretend and real. A fable usually has animals that act and talk like humans. And then anytime you've read a fable before, you might want to bring that up, or if it's the first time, talk about that. So in this case, we had read The Fox and the Grapes. And so The Fox and the Grapes is a story about a fox who wanted grapes and couldn't reach them. The fox then told everyone that grapes were sour and that he didn't want them anyway. The moral of the story was some people say bad things about whatever is not in their reach. So then you can use that as an example of it's not good to say bad things just because you don't have something, and talk about maybe somebody has a fancy car and you don't have a fancy car, so you're going to say you don't like that person. Talk about an example that they can relate to get that is true. But the Fox and the Grape stories is pretend, is nonfiction, is fiction. Give the example of the fable, show pictures of the material that they used in the previous lesson so they remember what the connection is. And that's another great thing about visuals. If I say everybody should be on this page and I hold it up, this page is not particularly good, but if it's something they've seen before, they would say, then they know exactly what page to get on. Okay, so this is what this lesson and the next lesson are going to use this little story about the boy who cried wolf as the background for our examples. So this came from Reading Comprehension Worksheets, who gave me permission to use it. I like doing lessons with short reading, teaching first time kinds of concepts with little short readings, and then having them apply it to larger readings, because I think they get the idea and feel better, and you guys can get some closure all in one lesson. So a shepherd boy tended his master's sheep near a dark forest not far from the village. Soon he found life in the pasture very dull. All he could do to amuse himself was talk to his dog or play his lyre. And so, of course, you're talking through and talking about what a lyre is, what a shepherd boy is, things like that. One day, as he sat watching the sheep and the quiet forest and thinking about what he would do should he see a wolf, he thought of a plan to amuse himself. His master had told him to call for help should a wolf attack the flock, and the villagers would drive it away. So now, though he had not seen anything that even looked like a wolf, he ran toward the village, shouting at the top of his voice, "Wolf, wolf!" As he expected, the villagers heard the cry, dropped their work, and ran in great excitement to the pasture. But when they got there, they found the boy doubled up with laughter at the trick he had played on them. A few days later, the shepherd boy again shouted, "Wolf, wolf!" Again, the villagers ran to help him, only to be laughed at again. Then one evening, as the sun was setting behind the forest and the shadows were creeping out over the pasture, a wolf really did spring from the underbrush and fell upon the sheep. In terror, the boy ran toward the village, shouting, "Wolf, wolf!" But though the villagers heard the cry, they did not run to help him as they had before. "He cannot fool us again," they said. The wolf killed a great many of the boy's sheep and then slipped away into the forest. So I never give them the moral. I let them try to figure out what the moral is. Okay, so the first intervention other than genre that we're going to talk about is graphic organizers. And they are well supported by the literature. Graphic organizers are a visually based organizer that shows knowledge and concepts and the relationship between them. So being specific or adding photographs aids in comprehension. Be careful to be consistent. So I had one little guy who I was working with writing, and I had taught him one graphic organizer for each genre that they were working in. It was in elementary school, so it was the expository types and the narrative type. And the teacher used different graphic organizers that had different organizational kinds of groupings, and he got very confused. I believe in using basically one graphic organizer, choosing that for each purpose, but not, and making them different by changing the photo or whatever, because what I want them to do when they're at Florida Writes or writing independently, I want them to be able to memorize that graphic organizer and use it to organize their own essay or organize their own reading. That's part of that functional connectivity that we were talking about. So I just recently, I had a 14-year-old boy, 14, okay? He read well, he was doing well in school, he decoded well, but his comprehension was very poor. And every time he had a writing assignment, he couldn't get started. He would get up, he would get down, and then pretty soon he would just end up copying what he had read. So I taught him a really simple graphic organizer, which was a tree, and I put the topic as the trunk of the tree, and then I put the branches as categories. So for instance, maybe it's transportation on the trunk of the tree, and each branch, there were 3 branches, and one was land, water, and air. And then the leaves on each of the big branches were the details that he could remember. And then the dead leaves on the ground were things that were not related to their topic. After he memorized that, I added veins on the leaves of the tree, which were examples of that detail. And he still uses that now. He's a senior getting ready to graduate, and his Stay9 scores went up from a 1 to a 3 just with that one graphic organizer, because he said, well, the teacher gave an assignment and everybody just kind of looked at it, and that's what I used to do. But now I knew just what to do, and I got really busy. So that's that combination of having lots of pockets of knowledge, not knowing how to connect them together, and knowing how to get started and organize. And that's what graphic organizers do. So they work on lots of different levels. They help comprehension, they help semantics, and also that executive functioning that we talk about. So I love them. Another way you can make a graphic organizer is to just brainstorm a semantic map, like on the bottom. So today we're going to read a passage about transportation. So you put that on the beginning and have them just come up with what they already know about transportation and fit it into your semantic organizer. And then they're all ready for a writing assignment, or they're all ready to read some more about maybe a specific land vehicle or whatever. You know about Venn diagrams, of course. This is very difficult for children with autism. They will get how things are the same, or they will get how things are different, but having things that are different and the same at the same time is very difficult without a visual. And that's why the Venn diagram is so helpful. You know, if you need to put a picture here, you can, and you can see everything on this side is just the elephant, everything on this side is the dog, and this is what they share. So visually, they understand that things can be the same and different at the same time. I had a little girl who was about 3, and she had waist length hair. And it was so beautiful. It was just gorgeous. It was kind of curly Polynesian hair. It was just so pretty. Well, she got a pair of toddler scissors and cut the front part of her hair to her scalp. It was no more than a 1/4 inch. I thought her mother was truly in great grief after that. So of course they took her to the beauty salon, and she had to have a real short little cut, because there was no getting around the fact that there was a whole patch of 1/4 inch hair in the front. And about 2 weeks later, she comes to the preschool, and she is crying. And I just couldn't figure out what was wrong. And finally she goes, "I don't want to be a boy anymore." And so we sat down and talked about, this was then stereotypical boy and girl, but we had to, and we used this diagram. And then I showed her pictures of babies who were bald, who were girls, and other girls with really short hair. And she finally realized she could get the idea that it was okay to have short hair and be a girl. She is now 16 and has had long hair all of her life since then. Okay. So why graphic organizers? I've talked a lot about that. Provides a concrete framework for existing knowledge to add to new knowledge. And that's something that we need to do every single time. They need to think of what they already know and add to that in a framework, in an organization. Otherwise, many times, the minds of autistic students are kind of like my closet. There's a shirt over here, there's a dress over here, there's long pants over here. I keep trying to organize my closet, but it doesn't stay organized that way. So there's little spots of knowledge in their brains like this that don't connect. Whereas if I had a nicely organized closet, I could go, oh, okay, it's hot outside and I need something informal. Here are my light shirts and shorts, rather than having to go through and just wearing whatever it is I find that's appropriate to the occasion. Excuse me, my sinuses are kind of awful today, so I have a little scratchy voice. It's visual contextual learning, which we know autistic children learn best visually. It provides permanent note-taking, and it is not transitory, and that's really important. Research supports many different frameworks with autistic students, including KWL, Venn diagrams, concept mapping, hierarchy maps, idea mapping, and the Freire model, which we'll talk about most of those tonight. Okay, ways to use graphic organizers with autistic students. First, make sure it fits the genre and the learning task. Sometimes I see graphic organizers and I'm not sure why they want them to organize it that way, given what they want them to learn. So it's really important to make sure that it is organized appropriately. It highlights the important concepts. Please don't make it too complicated. If you make the framework easy, they can remember it, and then they're going to put all their effort into filling it in rather than trying to figure out what it is. Always make connections. I know you're surprised about that. Modeling how to do it. A model is so helpful for autistic children. If you could just do one, or just do an example of anything, whether it's math or reading or whatever, it's always better if step by step, if it's the first time using that type of graphic organizer. Encourage active participation by leaving empty slots, by using a think aloud. Oh, gee, I wonder what could go in there, right? Don't use too many kinds. Realize that organizational pattern requires flexibility. So many times, just like we talked about last time, how they might have trouble if the directions were underlying one time and circling another, that's not too bad. That you still get a good answer and you know what information they have, but that's that executive function flexibility. Graphic organizers also require flexibility, and you want them to help make connections, not be confused by what you gave them. So you want them to recreate it when connecting instructional material or writing, and use pictures to add interest. I used to motivate students all the time just by adding a little SpongeBob in the corner, that SpongeBob wanted them to talk about the fable or whatever. And sometimes that gave them all the motivation they needed. Point out connections for now and in the future. Ask for student feedback. Ask what they were thinking or what made them think of that. And be sure to modify or make it better for the upcoming learning. Okay, so I'd like you to just take a minute and share ideas about how you write down, take a couple minutes and write down how you use graphic organizers, or if you don't, how you think you might use graphic organizers for whatever grade student. And let's have some sharing here. So take 3 minutes. I think I can take 3 minutes. Yes.
Go ahead and post those in the Q&A section. That
Yes.
way we know we don't have to sift through the chat, so that we can go ahead and read them aloud. Thank you for participating, by the way.
Yes. When I hate to let all this knowledge go to waste and not share it.
I know. So thank you for those of you who have been engaging with the chat. We really appreciate it. Okay, so Tara Adams is our first respondent, and she says, I will try the graphic organizer on the next reading assessment. Question, she has a question. Is it good to preview a reading assessment prior to the assessment?
Yes, as long as it's allowed in the rules. Anything you can do that primes, and we're going to talk about priming later, that prepares the mind for learning, it helps them be more successful. So for instance, I had a child that I had an IEP with today. And when they call me in, of course, it's usually a litigious situation. But anyway, he had a 1 on his reading test, but there were no accommodations given. So they re-administered, of course, a different prompt, but the same test to him using the accommodations, where he read it himself. The teacher read it to him, and then I can't remember what else they did. But anyway, he went from a 1 to a 3. Oh, they extended the writing time. He went from a 1 to a 3 just with appropriate accommodations. So the more you can teach them, just like we need to teach the genre, the framework of what they're reading, the more you can teach them the framework of the testing, the better off it is. It's just like us. You know, one of the first things my students always ask me is it multiple choice? Will there be fill in the blank? Or is there going to be an essay question? They want to know. All of those things help them study more appropriately for the test. And I understand those concerns. Okay,
so we have another question or comment. Actually, it's from Tiffany. And she says, well, first of all, Tara says, thanks for mentioning accommodation. This is the first year or 4th grade students will take the writing assessment.
Yes.
Okay, so we did that one live. Okay, so Tiffany mentions ones that I have utilized in the elementary level are the T-chart, the Venn diagram, the spider webs, and concept mapping. Good job.
Nice. You're an old pro at this already. That's fabulous. So when you're using those, how can you just quickly tell me, do you use it primarily for reading or for writing assignments, or for both?
Okay, so while we wait for her response, Tara mentioned about your question, whether it's allowed or not. She says, I don't know if it's allowed, definitely not on state assessments. I just think that loading background knowledge prior to the assessment.
I think that's perfectly appropriate in your classroom because that's what you would normally do in your lectures and your reading assignments and things like that. If you want to think about the difference between making them more comfortable just with the framework versus giving them information about the content, right? So to me, if I'm just priming them to be more successful, I'm just getting their mind ready to answer. I'm not giving them any answers, but I'm organizing their mind to get going. And I think that's really important. More importantly is then reduce your prompts and have them organize their own mind. So I had a little teacher that taught their kids the sign for remember. And so before they read it, they, of course, looked at the picture, guessed what the story was going to be about. And then she'd go like this. And what they were supposed to do is remember something they did that reminds them of what they're going to read. And that transferred that activating schema to them and got them used to doing that themselves before they read on their own in assessments and tests.
So Giovanni hit in something that I know you do for a fact, and he writes, I think that what you've shared are strategies that most teachers could or should be already using. I recall learning those strategies during my special education studies. It's good to see that these are strategies that are useful for students with autism, but are also beneficial to all students. If using these kinds of strategies in the classroom, it would not make students with special needs stand out.
Exactly. Yay! That's exactly why I chose these strategies, because I believe in full inclusion. And I feel like if they are in a self-contained class for sensory needs or behavioral needs or something like that, our end goal is always for them to transfer into general education. So if I teach them these kinds of strategies, they're going to fit in their class more often. Also, for those of you who are on the special ed side of things, if you're teaching the inclusive teacher how to support them. It's much easier if they already know this framework, and all you need to do is really point out how to make connections, how to make it visual, what the pitfalls are, those kinds of things.
And also, I would like to, yes, and I would like to add to that, that the reason why we brought Dr. Diehl to PEPSA's regional training series is because precisely this and her ability to utilize what teachers already know to make it clear to them that they don't have to learn much more, but rather adapt what they already know. So I think it strengthens their knowledge and it strengthens their confidence into how to best support our students with autism. So thank you for pointing that out, Giovanni, and thank you for that wonderful response, Dr. Diehl.
Oh, you're welcome.
One last thing, so we don't hold you up too much. Tiffany, yeah, Tiffany Sheffield comments, I utilize them for both. I work for our curriculum department concentrating on our ESC students. This is answering your question. Yeah. Concentrating on our ESC students in my county, and we use Benchmark. Our department has utilized them in both reading and writing, and we have created visuals for every unit for all grade levels. We have such growth because of it.
Yay, I love that totally. So then you can take the graphic organizers and then simply in your trainings point out how to make connections with them. If I'm at one grade level, I'll usually take something that's a goal at their level and do the whole talk using graphic organizers for that level and all the different strategies that we're going to talk about tonight. So we've learned about genre and we've learned about graphic organizers, and what they do is both support executive functioning and content, right? Okay, so now we're going to talk about priming, and I think Giovanni just I can't remember the other lovely person brought up in testing, trying to make it more familiar or prime them. And I always think of this story, even though my daughter is a school principal now. When I named her Kara, and I thought, I wanted to name her after my sister Carol, but Carol Diehl didn't sound too good, so I named her Kara. And I thought, oh, it's kind of an unusual name, but it's not too unusual.
So this was Tara.
Yes, my daughter Kara. So
no. Tara was the one who answered you. That's why I'm saying it, because your daughter is Kara.
I love your name. Anyway, after I had named her Kara, I saw Karas everywhere. And that's because my mind was primed to that name. The same thing goes when I buy a new car. I think, oh, this is kind of a nice, unusual car. And then all of a sudden I see them everywhere because my mind is primed. And that's what priming does for us. So it primes the brain to learn. Priming is acquainting or reacquainting important concepts, categories of a lesson beforehand. It activates prior knowledge or activates schema in your reading classes in some cases, and it's pre-teaching in other ways. So I love priming. I think priming does terrific things both with reading and learning, but also with transitions, with new experiences, things like that. If you prime someone, tomorrow's going to be a little different. We're going to have this. They're not so surprised and they don't have so much difficulty with transition. If they're going to a new school, if you prime them with, pictures of the school and the name of their teacher and what kind of classes they're going to have, those things help them feel less anxious. In that same way, priming helps them activate the pockets of knowledge that they need when they're moving forward. So it connects prior learning to future learning, which is how we learn, right? I always say when I'm teaching a class, take whatever I tell you and fit it in with what you already know, because that's how we learn without having to study, right? We reorganize our brain and add a little bit more on. It provides the foundation for future learning. It helps the brain recognize what's important in future learning. And, remember back, for those of you who have taken learning disability classes, they used to always have you have them read the questions before they read the chapter. And that was priming. That was helping them recognize what to look for when they're reading. It deepens their learning. It certainly provides motivation and supports independence. Okay, so ways to incorporate autistic learners, priming strategies. So we're going to do first a priming hunt. These are great for elementary school students. Have the team students hold hands or lock arms. So they have to plan their movements together. This is great for helping them have friends and make friends, things like that. Then put vocabulary pictures or words around the room and have the students coordinate walking around to collect them. So you use these pictures to prime vocabulary words or to connect to not previous knowledge or to predict what the text is about. So it primes their mind along with teaching how to change their movement, titrate their movement with another person. And this is a real fun activity. The kids love it and they have a good time. It's a little noisy because they're trying to do it together, but it works. For older students, what I do is I put printed slips of paper in a box or a bag, and I have them have a discussion by reaching in, getting the slip of paper, reading it, and then sharing what it makes them think of, whether it makes them think of an experience or previous knowledge or whatever, and then they pass the bag. So the bag, I also use this with little ones because the bag gives them the topic, right? It's all about China, say. And then each piece of paper is a turn. So for those people that have trouble taking turns, it's a great activity. And then they've all brainstormed about the topic. You provided a little support there, but it's a way of having a priming discussion. KWLH. So you guys have probably heard of KWL also. So this is a priming activity that helps the students activate prior knowledge or activate their schema. And it visually lets the students see many students' thoughts. So first it's what I want to know, and you brainstorm, and I usually use a semantic map, a graphic organizer with a semantic map on, because I don't have to do that ahead of time, right? And then what I know that way, what I want to know, and then we write down what they have questions about, where they could look, things like that. And then after they finish reading or investigating or researching a subject, we come back and we say what I learned, and it summarizes what they learned. And then we ask, gee, do we want to learn more about this? Are we curious? How can we learn more? So here's a nice example using our fable. What I know, they said wolves eat sheep, sheep stand together, sheep eat grass. What I need to know, what is a shepherd? What does crying wolf mean? What is a fable? And then they read it, and when they came back, a shepherd guards the sheep. The story is written by Aesop. A fable teaches a lesson through a story. And then how can I learn more? And we listed other kinds of books that might give them things and websites and resources of other fables and things like that. this is a very well-researched strategy that works really well for almost all students. It's got a strong research base. And what I like about it is it brings in that theory of mind. What do I know? And then the kids learn that, gee, Curtis knows different things than I do, and Rose knows different things than Curtis does. So it helps them get to know things like that. In the very beginning of learning theory of mind, I make books, very simple books about likes and dislikes. So everybody makes their likes and dislikes, and I use real basic stuff like color, favorite TV program, favorite food, that kind of stuff. And everybody makes their book, and then we share them, and then I put them up around the room, and I give them things like, you want to buy a birthday present for Rose, you want to buy a blouse, what color blouse should it be? And so they have to think, oh, I need to go to Rose and see what her favorite color is. And they start learning that people have other minds. Okay, making connections. I think you've probably seen Text and You, and that would be, have you ever seen a wolf or a sheep? That's the Text and You. The text in other books. Have you ever read another book about a wolf? Like the Three Little Pigs. Sometimes I'll put out other books so they can think about that. The text in the world. Do you think we still have shepherds, right? Has your friend seen a wolf or a sheep? So these are things that I will give as a question in a group where they can share their experiences within each other. And it makes for a nice, simple discussion, because it's often very difficult for autistic children to act as an appropriate member of the group. They do one of two things. Either they're quiet and don't do anything or say anything, or they dominate the whole discussion or correct other people the whole time. So it really helps to give them something that guides them when you're discussing. And we'll have a little strategy about that a little later on. What books have both you and your friend have you and your friend both read? So here we have that thought bubble C sharing the same books. So they start to learn theory of mind through these kinds of activities. Plus it makes that wonderful two-word term that I love, functional connectivity. Okay, so now we're going to move a little bit to anaphora. Now we talked a little bit about that last time, and when you think of anaphora, it's just pronouns and their reference, okay? So an anaphora reference means that a word in the text refers back to other ideas in the text for its meaning. Now you can have cataphora to cataphoric references go forward, but this is primarily, anaphora is primarily what most texts use. And students with autism have a great deal of difficulty knowing what referent unspecified words refer to. The same thing goes for stuff and things, those kind of non-specific nouns that are in stories. So I usually teach first by sorting. I teach sorting who so a picture of them, you, a picture of other people, and then we go between he and she. It's harder than ever to talk about gender, but you have to just do a little bit of gender stereotypes with hair and clothing here for them to get the pronouns. Otherwise, they get too confused. So he for the boys, she for the girls, it for the things. And then we, with the group of people, you as a group of people, and they with other people not including that person. So here are some ways that I think about. Non-specific words are difficult to assign meaning and context. And remember, we said the research says the farther away the pronoun is from its referent, the more difficult it is to assign meaning. Identifying references before reading was very helpful. This actually measurably improved reading comprehension in autistic students. Cued passages before reading greatly increased reading comprehension. And it's also been shown that the farther away the pronoun is to its referent influences reading comprehension. So just 1 minute, I'm going to take a sip of my Diet Coke. I know it's bad for me. Okay. So here's one way, giving simple checks before reading and throughout reading. So sometimes I use highlight tape. It's just simply see-through tape that has a tint to it, and it pulls off and it doesn't hurt the book or the paper. And so if I'm looking for she's, I can put the she as pink, and for boys the blue, and then otherwise I can just use the same color as the referent. So a shepherd boy tended his master's sheep near a dark forest not far from the village. Soon he, so it's the same color they know, is soon the shepherd boy found life in the pasture very dull. All the shepherd boy could do to amuse himself was talk to his dog or play with his lyre. So then I usually give a simple check, you know. So soon he found life in pasture is very dull. Who is he? And they can pick between three. So I use a prompt hierarchy where I start with maybe 2 or 3, then I move to here are all the characters that you could choose from in the book, and then I don't give any support. So pretty soon they can do it all on their own. All right, boy, I whipped through that, didn't I? I'm sorry, I went through that so quickly. So we are all ready to the ticket out the door. So let's talk and discuss this a little bit. Write down 3 things you will use in your classroom, and we'll share it in the group. You please use the chat.
Yes, the Q&A, please.
I'll give you about 5 minutes. Well, I was too chatty last time and I'm not chatty enough.
I will ask a question.
Sure.
Because I always bring this point up when I'm doing trainings. And so one of my things is that with all the characteristics of autism, tending to do lean towards repetition and adherence to routines and all that stuff. For those who may be here or maybe watching this at a later time, how quickly should they expect these strategies to work? to quote unquote work. Yes.
But I really think that I have children who learn it the first time. And then I have children that need it every single day of the year. So it's so different. But what I really believe is that if you're consistent and if your structure is there so your content can change, they will continue to learn and build. But you have to have that consistency. You have to remind them of what they learned before and how that connects to what they know now, because they tend to learn things very specifically for one place. So if they'll learn what Mrs. Smith likes, but they won't transfer that information to what Mrs. Jones wants. So the same thing goes for their learning. If you can continue to make those connections and build on those connections, then I think the learning comes faster. And I think the more you build on those connections, the faster the learning comes. But there are some children who have a great deal of difficulty putting their information in long-term memory. Some of our kids can have a lot of delayed echolale and they can do that, but it's kind of nonsensical, or maybe it has a little bit of something to do with it, but they don't put it in long-term storage with meaning and function. So that's always the purpose and always the intent. But it really depends on the child, how many repetitions you need. I would say in general, being consistent and being repetitious is vital for all learners, but especially autistic learners. Especially your structure and your framework of learning, I think, is the most important part of that consistency. Now, that doesn't mean keep things exactly the same all the time, because then you're teaching them only to do well in your classroom. So you want to have some kind of planned flexibility. I always keep the structure, keep the schedule the same, change the content, but maybe have the vehicles for teaching, like my graphic organizers or things like that, use the same framework, but different content.
Exactly. You really answered that very well. Thank you so much for saying that. I think that consistency, and that's what I tell and parents and educators all the time. It's not new, it's not a routine, it's not ingrained until it becomes ingrained, until it becomes their new routine or their new normal, their new way of doing it. Like you said, transferring it from one setting, from one person, and from different materials at a time. You said it last week. Can you say it again for those who aren't?
So a skill is not mastered unless it's across settings, people, and materials. So I've actually had children who could only tell me the colors on those 1-inch square blocks. But if I asked her the color of my blouse, she couldn't tell me because she had only learned that in those 1-inch square blocks. So we really have to make sure those connections are being made in the brain. Just keep thinking of how lit up you want that brain to be, that you want it to reach out and make connections all the time. And if you have a question tonight, not even necessarily about reading comprehension, or just about something that's going on in your classroom, we have a few extra minutes. So I'm more than happy to support that or give you some insight there.
Perfect. So we have 5 responses, so I'll get going. So the first one from Janice is, she plans on making genre instruction more visual.
Great.
Giovanni answered, hold on. Giovanni answered, I am not a teacher and I understand the strategies you're teaching. What would you suggest a teacher do in the general education classroom to address reading comprehension needs for only 1 or 2 students? would suggest using what you're suggesting for all students, but time is a barrier. I apologize, isn't what you were seeking as a ticket out.
Oh, that's fine. That's a great question. Okay, so the reason I chose these are actually chosen from the literature for all students and for students, typical learners. And then out of the general strategies that I took that are evidence-based for all students, I chose those things that are particularly salient for students with autism. So whether you have a group or whether you have just a couple of students, you can use any of these strategies that we do tonight or the next couple nights with any of them. You know, are you a therapist?
I would imagine he is, but
Yeah.
while we wait for his response, I'm going to read, oh, he says BCBA, yes. So he's a BCBA
Got it.
behavior analyst, yeah.
So if you were gonna support the teacher while they're having reading comprehension, the one big rule is, how do I make it visual? So if she's not writing down words as you're going along, you could write down words that will help him focus and stay him or her stay on topic and stay as things are going on. You can write diagrams or even little pictures and things of visuals that will help him stay more engaged.
Yes. Tiffany writes, I love learning more about anaphora, and it is something that I will encourage the teachers I work with to do with their ESC students. I also love the visual supports. They are so important for our students with disabilities. And lastly, the graphic organizers are something that I will continue to utilize and encourage the teachers I work with to use as well. They are vital for our students, but especially for our students with autism.
Yes, I so totally agree with you. And I want to re-emphasize that's important for them to be able to do it independently. So after you've given them that kind of graphic organizer, have them recreate it in a simpler form so they can continue to organize their mind if you are not there. You know, because yes, go ahead.
No, finish that.
Because, so for instance, my kiddo that went from a 1 to a 3, he could draw a simple tree and leaves and dead leaves and stuff like that. And so no matter where he writes, he calls it the tree of Diehl. and he writes the tree of Diehl, and it helps him organize what he's thinking and how he's, you know, if he reads something, how to organize his thoughts. So their graphic organizers are just vital.
Yes. And I just wanted to comment that as a consultant as well, and because my age group is early childhood, and we know the early years are difficult enough on even in typical development, so much more difficult while we transition into more understanding. And so visual supports, I think a lot of times get put down by either the parents, the providers, the educators, because it's not a quick fix. It's not an immediate fix yet. And so they give up thinking that it doesn't work, but it's so vital. It's so vital. I tell them it's their language, is the way they think, is the way that we need to speak their language, sort of. So I'm so glad to hear all these wonderful ideas that I will incorporate and share myself. Now,
I want to share one story that I just thought of a mutual friend of ours who had a non-speaking child, and she was just a natural educator, and so gave her child so many illustrations and written down as things go on. And now that non-speaking child could talk about how she was feeling during the recent hurricane that we had, that she wanted the generators to go away and the lights to come and things like that. So that visual support really gave her the language that she needed, even though she was non-speaking for most of her life. So those kind of foundations just really pay off as children grow and get more complex in their learning. As I talked about that high school child, that kind of format really helps them organize their thinking, because they have all this knowledge, but unless you hit the right button, the knowledge won't come out. But if you teach them to organize their executive functioning and their planning from the beginning, then they have access to that knowledge when they need it.
Exactly. Okay, so
that's
Tara,
my lecture 101.
Tara, I love it. I love it. So Tara writes, students have assessment on Thursday. So tomorrow I will use the graphic organizer in pre-reading the questions to the students. I also like the kinetic activity to find the meaning of new vocabulary words, what the reading unit introduces. And finally, I will use a schedule of how to complete a math assignment in class, concluding where to submit, turn in the assignment.
Absolutely. That is fabulous. You're going to have a wonderful day tomorrow. Thank you so much again. Next week we have a little busier day. I did the whole series and then I carved it out, and I guess I didn't put them in equal chunks. But we're going to talk about a little bit of what to do during reading, and then how to deal with what to do after reading, and a little bit of writing the next time. Yeah. All right.
So Giovanni just wanted to answer something. He said, I can't go back to edit my comment, but the reason why I would use these for all students, it would be to take out the extra time needed to help one student, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I think implementing it for the whole class would actually assist the one or two students who might need that extra support. Again, yes, we always say what works for autism works for all students.
Well, and
vice versa.
Yeah, and these strategies were specifically picked because they are evidence-based research strategies for all students, but ones we particularly had a research base also with autism.
Yeah. And then Tara says, thank you.
Oh, I love your name.
I figured you would. Since you love Kara, so Kara's name so much. Yes. So anyway, so thank you to all of you who were present here. We wanted to thank you, first of all, thank Dr. Diehl for a wonderful presentation again, and for always being so willing to accept your questions now during the live and even beyond. Last week you gave out your email to the class before. So if you, and you mentioned to us before we started, you had been in contact with a couple of the attendees from last week. So I just want to encourage everyone, if you have questions, like she says, throughout the week or after this series is over, in the survey that you will receive, you will be receiving a notification from us talking about a survey. There's a portion of it for you to enter your questions. We are thinking about doing a follow-up presentation just based on your questions. So just make sure that that you do that, even if it is a synchronous activity or asynchronous as well. Dr. Diehl did want to address all your questions. So I know for sure she wants to share her email.
Yes. Diehl, D-I-E-H-L, SDIEHL at usa.edu. So Diehl at usa.edu. And I owe Giovanni some things, but he wanted for all ages for calming and coping strategies. So that's going to take me a little while, Giovanni.
So I just wanted to know that we, as we speak, we're getting registration for your third session. So that's exciting. So if you're here and you're registering, be sure to be registering for the third and the fourth. You won't miss anything. We are going to make available session number 1 and 2 shortly. Can't tell you exactly when, but in the coming days, we'll be sharing those to make sure that everybody who missed session number 1 is able to catch up. And if you need to go back and review anything that was shared today, you'll have access to that as well. I did go ahead and share the PowerPoint presentations as in the PDF format as well, just for you to be able to refer back to it and trigger your memory. So again, for those of you watching live right now, thank you for being here, and thank you for responding to our survey that will follow, which is the way that you will be able to get your certificate of completion so that you can turn that into your districts for CEs. Is there anything else you wanted to say, Dr. Diehl?
No, I've just enjoyed it so much. Can't wait for next week.
Yes. And you, Beatrice, did you want something to say? I know you wanted to get more information about the presentation, the survey.
Yes, so once again, once the webinar finishes, you'll be redirected to a survey. So we really appreciate if you could fill that out right away. And then we'll also follow up with an email. And just as a reminder, session number 3 is in 2 weeks on Monday, November 4th from 6 to 8 p.m.
Yes,
Right.
thank you so much. Thank you again, everyone. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. And again, if you have colleagues who might be interested in joining the remainder 3, session 3 and 4, but might be thinking, oh, I missed the first 2, just let them know that this will become available on demand so they can catch up and so they can still register for session 3 and 4. Thank you so much, and we'll say goodbye for now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.